Welcome to my tent. It's very blue. That's just the premise. I wanted to film outside today because it's really nice weather. The sun's out, the sky is blue, not as blue as this tent though. I'm a bit embarrassed to be talking loudly in case my neighbors hear me sitting out here in the tent. Yeah, that's... So this is a knit with me video. Where I also asked you guys if you had any specific questions for me or topics you would like me to talk about while I knit and chat. I realized I haven't been speaking in any of my recent videos. They've all been, you know, with text, but not with my voice in it for like half a year. So I'm not that used to talking in front of the camera right now. I feel like I need to warm up to it. It's surprisingly difficult. Anyway, first step on the agenda is showing you what I've got on my needles right now. It is a well, you can't see the color in here. I'll show you a different clip from outside. It's beige and it's got a lace pattern, a pink detail on the crochet assembled shoulder. I've knitted it from the bottom and up and then assembled the shoulders together, and now I've picked up the stitches for the sleeves. So that's the part I'm working on right now, is the right sleeve. Well, I have to pay a bit more attention than with just regular stockinette because I have to do the lace pattern. I don't know my knitting terms that well either, but I have to... Oh, there you can see the color here. But I knit together 2 stitches and then I add a new one, and that means I have to be counting a lot while I'm working. But you also kind of fall into a rhythm with it. So I'm wearing my new tablecloth shirt. It's not a tablecloth, it's a pillowcase, but it looks like a picnic kind of tablecloth. And I feel like a milkmaid in a good way. So I also wanted to show off some different other projects I've got going on right now, knitting projects specifically. This blue sweater, which is a top-down Raglan sweater. Did I drop a stitch here? Oh, well, I have to fix that. This is almost the smallest size needles you can knit on, and it's taken a really long time. The yarn is from a different sweater that I unraveled. I found it at a secondhand store. It was really weird. It was a cardigan with short sleeves and a lace detail, and then it was like disproportionately long in my opinion. I was never gonna wear it, but the yarn was extremely nice, very soft, and obviously really high quality. So I unraveled it and now I'm working on a sweater, but I only brought the larger round needle with me. I don't have the one that's the right size for the sleeves. I only have double pointed needles in that size, and it takes a lot longer to knit on double pointed needles than working in the round. So I'm gonna delay until I can find the right needle, which is probably not for a few months because I would have to find it at a store, ideally at a thrift store, and I don't see those opening up very soon. So that project has been tabled for a bit because of that. And it might look a little small, but it's quite stretchy, more like a shirt than a sweater. Next up, I've been working on this knitted mask for a school project. So I guess I'll show you. The light in here is not ideal to show off something as colorful as this. This is a project for my current course, which has been, in my opinion, sort of derailed by going online. This is definitely a different project than what I would have worked on if I had the school facilities available to me. If everything was different, I would be working differently, but this has been what I've been able to work with in terms of what materials I brought with me and what I've been capable of sort of thinking up on my own here in my parents' house without my teachers. I wanted to make something with a mask because I'm generally really interested in masks and all the mythology they refer to, how they're involved in almost like any culture has some sort of mask in their rituals, in their myths, in their religion, or in their performances. The metaphor of wearing a mask and concealing yourself for different purposes of as I said, rituals or entertainment or protection. In these days we see a lot of masks for protection, and this is, I'm sure this could protect you, but it's not very practical, and that's sort of also the point of it. I think we're experiencing a lot of heightened awareness of how we are constantly transmitting disease to each other, and the inherent danger, I think, of being in public and touching your own face, other people touching their face or being close to you. So we're experiencing a sudden alienation to our own bodies and our own faces, and to strangers, and to distance, which is something that I wanted to work with visually through a medium that I had available to me, that I had access to here in my parents' home. So this is what I've conjured up. My current course is called, I think, I have to translate it because it's in Danish, but the current course title is Object, Body, and Expression. So it's very much about how different objects affect how the body is perceived and how the body is sensed, I think. In my interpretation, I think, of the part of the course I ended up getting before everything went down. So each one of these has taken, I think, 2 hours, more or less, probably more, to knit, and the mask itself is the second mask I've knitted. As you can see in my most recent vlog I uploaded, I knitted a new one that's pink, as opposed to my first quarantine vlog, and where you see the mask I knitted was white, because that was my first draft, but it was of wool and it was really itchy and it didn't make sense. The mask and then all the appliques, which I have added onto the mask by crocheting, which is something I've been learning about. So that's the next project, which isn't technically knitting, I know, but it's yarn, and it's the same, up the same alley. But I've been learning how to crochet. I've been doing all these granny squares that I am hoping to add together to maybe a sweater. Probably not a blanket because I don't have that much yarn, and I want a smaller project at first here. Learning to crochet, and that's been fun. And then lastly, we found this at home, and none of us were wearing it, but the yarn was really nice, the color was really nice. It's like a oatmeal beige brown kind of warm toned light color with specks of orange and green and red and white. So I've unraveled this and I have documented the process, and I'm gonna document the whole process of knitting a sweater with this, hopefully. So look out for that. I'm gonna pick up my phone here and find the screenshots I took of what people wanted me to talk about. Okay, so I have not organized these yet, and I should have. Someone asked if I've seen Tiger King. I have not. From what I've heard of it, I don't think it's my kind of show. I think it sounds like it's really stressful. It doesn't really appeal to me immediately, so sorry if you like it. I can't really chat with you about it. Someone asks how I keep myself busy and mentally healthy during this quarantine, which is a really good question. I think I show it a bit in my vlogs, how important it is to not hold great expectations for yourself during this time, because I find that generally when you don't pressure yourself to be great, that's when you're gonna actually accomplish anything. But balancing sort of mentally stimulating and physically stimulating things, so where you don't play a game or watch a television show for the entirety of the day, but you also balance it with more grounding activities that make you feel more in contact with your body and with the world around you. For example, going for walks or baking. For me, it's knitting. I keep messing this up because I'm not paying attention. I think to me, I find it kind of like a free fall. You know, when you're falling, the best thing you can do is actually to relax your limbs and your muscles, because if you tense up, it's gonna hurt your body a lot more when you do collide with the ground. And I think that applies metaphorically to at least my experience, where I feel like if I try to gain control and understand everything and then establish a mindset around this, that I'm gonna lose my footing in this no matter what. It's gonna escalate, it's gonna change, in not even trying to or assuming that I will be able to be cool, calm, and collected during all this has allowed me to be a lot more calm in the situation than I think I would be if I was trying to be calm. Again, sort of the same thing as with not having great expectations for yourself. You know, very basic things such as I sleep enough. If I wake up before 9, I feel really good about that, but sometimes I fall asleep and I sleep through all of my alarms. Whenever that happens, I'm just sort of allowing myself that extra sleep and thinking, if I slept that heavily, then I must have needed it, you know? But establishing sort of a very basic everyday routine, having a certain time I get up and go to sleep every day and every night, that generally just really helps the body. And when the basic needs of the body are met, that really helps your mindset as well. Making sure you move around, making sure you go to bed at a certain time, making sure you get some fresh air, making sure you eat enough and not too much. Those are just very basic physical bodily things that really help your mental space as well, at least for me. Favorite books, movies, and podcasts. So I don't listen to any podcasts except for the Gus and Eddie podcast here on YouTube. Everyone's always talking about their favorite podcasts and like, oh, there's a bee in here. I don't listen to podcasts. I find it hard to connect to the people or the theme or the vibe. But for some reason, the only podcast I watch and listen to is the Gus and Eddie podcast. It's an hour long every time, and I always sit down with it and knit or edit my video or whatever activity I'm doing at the time. So I'm always doing something else, cooking while it's playing or eating while it's playing. On paper, I have nothing in common with these two like Midwestern American boys living in Los Angeles as a Scandinavian design student. There's still like a lot of topics that they take up and a lot of their attitude and a lot of their way of interacting with each other that reminds me a lot of me or relates a lot to my life experience, and in some ways feels parallel to how my interactions with my best friend go, because you can just feel how much they know each other and how much they talk on a daily basis, and that really bleeds into their interactions in a way that I find very charming. I feel very much like I'm just listening to my friends talk, which is very very calming. So I love how they kind of talk about the behind the scenes elements of how content creators are real life human beings, and sort of how numbers affect you and how people's behaviors are weird in these parasocial relationships we form through social media platforms such as YouTube, because I relate a lot to it in a smaller scale and with a different audience. That's my favorite podcast because it's the only podcast I listen to. Some of my favorite movies of all time are Arrival and Swiss Army Man. Both movies have really, really interesting soundtracks and very non-stereotypic, non-Hollywood-like storylines and great actors in them. I also really love Lost River because it's full of really haunting images. I think it's a very beautiful, very fever dream sort of storytelling. The imagery was so stuck on my brain for days after I saw it for the first time. It's gotten a lot of beatings from critics, but I think personally it's all about the mouthfeel, and the mouthfeel of that movie is great. I also really love Interstellar. I love the kind of storylines that you have to piece together afterwards, where you don't understand what the hell is going on until retrospectively, because I love watching movies several times, and so it's always great to have a movie that your experience of it is genuinely different the second time you watch it, because you understand what's happening, which you don't in the first round. And I really love the Interstellar soundtrack. I also recently rewatched Spirited Away because the Miyazaki movies are now streaming on Netflix. It's a very tactile movie. I feel like the whole universe is so real, you can sense it. There's so much heart and soul in the way that it's animated. It's also quite distressing and uncomfortable, a movie. Like the themes and the imagery, it's quite heavy. Like it's not a children's movie at all. I have been listening to Jane Austen's Emma and Pride and Prejudice on my audiobook app, which has been a real treat. And since I just listened to Emma, I also rewatched Clueless, because I read somewhere, a while ago, that it was a modern day interpretation of a Jane Austen novel. At that time when I read it, I was like, as if those are such different worlds, but actually it makes so much sense. It was really fun to rewatch it with the book in mind and kind of go, oh, so he's Frank Churchill, right? It was really fun. And it's also just a great movie. Also, I just watched Venom. I rented it on YouTube and I watched it 3 times within the rental period of 48 hours. I don't know what happened. Like, usually I get really stressed out about the rental period and how you're able to watch a movie several times within the rental period, because I always kind of want to milk the rental period and make sure I watch it several times, but usually it gets so fresh in your mind after such a short time that it doesn't make sense to watch it again. But for some reason I genuinely enjoyed watching it 3 times within 48 hours, so that has made me consider actually just buying it so I can watch it again. What makes me motivated to knit is a question. I'm very motivated by the final product, which a lot of people say, knitting is like meditating and it's so relaxing, but sometimes it's not that relaxing to me actually, because I get so headstrong about wanting to finish it within an unreasonable timeline. Usually it's not too much, like usually it's just enough of a motivation to keep going that I want to finish it, and not enough to demotivate me because it's not going quickly enough, It's a balance. I think it's a blessing to see, skeins of yarn turn into a garment. I think it's so satisfying, and it's like a mental puzzle that you do to figure out all the different parts and the different techniques that you need to use to get the certain look that you want, the fit that you want. And my tips for freehanding patterns, my attitude is that if I try to write it all down and think it all through and do all the math that you have to do for freehanding before you go ahead and actually freehand, unless you're really good at it, you're not going to be able to figure out all the specifics anyway. In my experience and with my capacity, I think the best thing is just to try it, and the more you try it, the more control you get. Something is going to be different from what you thought. Can you shut up? The birds are so loud. Someone asks what my favorite color combination is, and at the moment I think it's lilac and gray. But I also really love periwinkle and brick, and I also love pink and green, certain tones of those colors, as well as lilac and bright red. I love together. In terms of inspiration, I think I've mentioned before that my general inspirations are two Danish knitters, Stine Leth and Lærke Bakker, who I'm mutuals with both of them on Instagram, and if I had known that like 3 years ago, my heart would have just burst from it, and it's still bursting from it a little bit. One is a knit artist and the other is a knit designer. I love using the Instagram folders as my Pinterest, and I will fight anyone who says that Pinterest is better than Instagram in terms of finding inspiration. At this point, Instagram knows me really, really well. The algorithm has just figured me out. So my explore page is full of posts that I actually really want to see, from small creators and designers that I wouldn't have found otherwise. And I've actually thought about doing a explore my saved folders with me, because I'm so meticulous with it, and I have different categories for every single folder, and I'm really proud of it, and I draw so much inspiration and motivation from it, and I think a lot of people could benefit from using the saved folders instead of Pinterest. But I'm also just saying that because I don't understand how Pinterest works, but also because Pinterest really you know, it's a third party coming in and pinning someone else's content, whereas on Instagram it's the content owner usually who's posting the content. I feel a lot better knowing the source of my inspiration. There are a lot of these questions that are about my school and my study. Some of them are about my art school, which I don't go to an art school, I go to a design school, but I get it, that's quite close together. And how I like it, and what my plans are, and what my hopes are for the future. And I think I'm gonna do maybe a different video for that, where I've sat down and I've articulated some thoughts on it, because I find myself kind of at a loss for the right articulation of my emotions in this context, especially now where everything is so well, everything has been so unraveled and undone in some ways by this global situation, by this crisis. So I find myself sort of at a loss for how to pick up that topic right now. So I'm thinking of doing a separate video on my experience, if it resonates. This sweater is actually made with yarn I got from my grandmother. It's not a color I would normally pick up. That's a fun challenge too, with finding your materials secondhand or through others, not directly in a yarn store where the yarn is extremely expensive. Getting it through some other channel I think is really great at activating your imagination. When you have a limited amount of material, when you have a certain color you wouldn't have picked for yourself, I think, at least for me, it inspires me to really use my imagination and to really maybe break with some of my habits. With this global crisis, I think a lot of content creators are kind of thinking twice about what they're sharing and what they're promoting to people. I think in the perspective of there being a global crisis, it's kind of hard to take yourself seriously, and I think a lot of people are very quick to come out with like 10,000 things you can do during your quarantine, and how to stay happy and healthy, and how-tos, and I think generally there's a tendency to be a lot of clutter and a lot of noise and a lot of people saying the same thing, and I think it adds to sort of a digital noise pollution that I really don't want to add to. So I find myself kind of sometimes second guessing whether I should add my voice sort of to that calamity of input. But I hope that you find some solace, some entertainment, or some inspiration or comfort in this video or any of my other recent videos. I do really personally find a lot of joy and energy to making these videos. So I'm planning on making some more these next weeks. So on this episode of the mortifying ordeal of being known, this has been me knitting while talking in a tent in my backyard. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you were knitting something while you made it. I would love to hear if you have any knitting projects or crafting projects at the moment, how you're doing, how you're spending your time, what you thought of the different topics I was talking about. Like, I literally love hearing comments, so don't be shy, don't hold back. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.